Shabbat Shalom, my friends. So our Torah conversations continue. This week we are exploring VaYera Genesis 18:1 and following. And the richness all over Genesis. It's terrific. Abram is visited by three angels. You know the story. Receives a promise from God that within a year he and Sarah will be parents of a son. Sarah laughs. And that laughter was not exactly an expression of joy. Rather, it was incredulous, and maybe it was even a little bit bitter. Vatitzchak Sarah. Sarah laughed. Really? I'm going to be a mother now, at my age, at his age? She laughed, and the promised son would eventually bear the name of Yitzchak, the product of laughter. God then confides in Abraham through those same angels that Sodom and Gomorrah are about to be destroyed. Abraham then engages with God in some good old-fashioned shuk bargaining. It's sort of like Friday afternoon in Jerusalem at Machane Yehuda. What if there are 50 righteous people? Would you destroy them then? 40? 30? 20? 10? Great negotiation. These are familiar stories. Great stories to tell the kids, stories of hope and stories of a strong moral vision. But then beginning with Genesis 21:9 and following, there is a different kind of story, not so popularly known, and certainly not a story that is adorned with a clear moral vision. Actually, I've rarely touched upon the story in the 53 years since I was ordained. But here it is, and this time I'm going to trust you, our unique community, enough to try to grapple with it in public. I probably will not express myself well, and maybe I'm going to get some of the facts wrong, so I probably will be misunderstood. Okay, here we go. Isaac was not Abraham's firstborn. That honor belonged to Ishmael, the son of Hagar and Abraham. The text tells us that Hagar was an Egyptian and that she was Sarah's servant, or some might read the text, Sarah's slave. Sarah gave Hagar to Abraham when Sarah herself could not conceive. So Ishmael might already have been 10 years old at the time when Isaac, son of Sarah and Abraham, was born. But simultaneous with that long-awaited birth, jealousy enters the equation. Something was now very displeasing to Sarah about Ishmael and about Hagar. She didn't like the way that Ishmael treated Isaac, and she didn't like Hagar's expanded special role in the household, and she certainly didn't want her servant's son becoming Abraham's designated heir. So Sarah went to Abraham and told him to drive Hagar and Ishmael out of the camp. Abraham consulted with God and received divine approval. Sort of a quote, "Don't grieve over Ishmael and Hagar, just do what Sarah tells you to do." That's what God says. That's a lesson for spouses far into the future. Just do what your loved one says. And so it was. With little in the way of provisions and very little water, Hagar and Ishmael were driven out of Abraham's tents. They probably would have died in the wilderness. But God intervened, and they were saved. Every people has a founding myth, and Genesis is the full elaboration of the Jewish founding myth. But interwoven within this text is also the founding myth of Islam. And when post-Talmudic rabbis deepened their study of this Sedra, they were well aware of the reality of the Muslim world. Early on, before the Islamic expansion, how did the rabbis view Hagar? Well, she was an Egyptian princess. She spoke nasty little things against Sarah, even as Abraham really fell in love with Hagar. So Sarah's attitude toward her once beloved servant soured. But nevertheless, the rabbis imagined that Hagar benefited enormously from living in Abraham's household. She became a spiritually elevated person, worthy of having angels speak with her. Angels, but not God. God spoke with Abraham. God spoke with Sarah, not with Hagar. The rabbi struggled with why Hagar became pregnant immediately, while it took Sarah more than a decade. Now, setting aside the niceties of biology, the rabbis decided that it simply took that long for someone to become worthy to become Isaac's mother. In other words, Sarah had to evolve into a worthy vessel. A woman as a vessel. The rabbis didn't nail that. She was worthy, Sarah was, but she was also cruel and vindictive. The rabbis told that as part of the Midrash. One Midrash has Sarah throwing her shoe at Hagar's face. And I think we all know that's pretty much of a really serious insult, even today in the Middle East. Another Midrash says that Sarah treated Hagar worse than all of her other slaves. And all the while, around her back, Hagar mocked Sarah. And Abraham Avinu, our patriarch. Abraham, the rabbis portrayed him at best as ambivalent. He loved Ishmael. He loved Hagar. But he knew that his future was through Sarah. The rabbis then in Midrash assert that even after Hagar and Ishmael survived their expulsion from the camp, Abraham stayed in touch with them. He never really abandoned them. Not in the Torah, in the Midrash. But then, how did the post-Talmudic rabbis and commentators come to view Ishmael? A flip, really different. They viewed him through the lens of the reality of the conquest by Islam of much of the known world. They condemned Ishmael with the heaviest of assaults, accusing him of being a murderer, a sexual predator, and a worshiper of idols. In rabbinic parlance, those three sins are the cardinal sins, and Ishmael was guilty of all of them. Not in the Torah, but the rabbis created that. Now, in Islam's founding myth, Ishmael was a prophet. Not only a prophet, he was an ancestor of the prophet Muhammad. In that same founding myth, Ishmael and Hagar were brought to Mecca by Abraham. And Abraham and Ishmael, according to the Islamic founding myth, were asserted to have built the Kaaba there, that ancient worship place. And then father and son, Abraham and Ishmael, put the black meteorite in the eastern corner of the Kaaba. And more, Hagar's running back and forth to find water after Abraham had expelled her from the tents. That running back and forth is reenacted every year during the Hajj, the sacred pilgrimage to Mecca. Needless to say, the two founding myths also differ about the Akedah, the binding of what? Isaac? The Jewish version had Isaac being bound to the altar. The Muslim version suggests that the intended victim was Ishmael. So where does all of that leave us? The words of the Torah leave us with a distasteful view of Sarah. Cruel, jealous, vindictive. Abraham comes across as caring less about Ishmael and Hagar, whom he loved, than he did about the residents of Sodom and Gomorrah, for whom he fought. The post-Talmudic rabbis enhanced Hagar's status, while unequivocally condemning Ishmael retroactively. And in the mythology of Islam, you have clear evidence of what we would call today cultural appropriation. Our stories were claimed and then transformed by another people. These claims and counterclaims, my friends, will never be resolved by objective research. Facts we will never have. And I am comfortable in saying that I can live with that. We don't need to waste time and energy trying to convince the other that he or she is wrong. The facts are beyond recovering, but the truths that emerge deserve to be the focus of our attention. Let it be the task then of the Jews to learn, to teach, and to live the truths of Judaism. Let's put our energy into that. The Judaism of today is the lineal descendant of biblical Judaism. In our texts, in our traditions, and yes, in our myths, are embedded truths that have shaped all of the Western world. Not bad. Let those truths compete in the hearts and minds of the 7 billion people who inhabit our planet today. Let those truths, the fundamental core truths of Judaism, be demonstrated not by our arguments with Muslims, but by how we act toward others who are not the same as we are. And maybe, I'm not messianic, but maybe, just maybe, someday, Hagar and Sarah, Isaac and Ishmael will find a way back into each other's hearts and into each other's narratives. That's something to work toward. Okay, that's it for today. This week, more than ever, I would welcome your feedback, your thoughtful comments, and obviously, this week, more than ever, I invite you to hit share and bring others into this really worthy conversation. Have a wonderful week. Shabbat Shalom.